All right, so we've done a good job so far of designing our program. We actually gone through pretty much the first 8 steps when it comes to designing a program. I want you to mimic this for every problem you're ever going to have in this course. I promise you the reason I'm having you do this is because it actually takes less time. You may tell me, but Bob, some of these programs are so short, I don't need to do all of this. I get it, but the whole idea is I want you to practice it. I had a student recently come to me going, I kind of bypassed all that stuff when we were doing easy problems, and now I have no idea how to do it, and now it's taking me probably 5 times longer to do my assignments. And I'm like, yep, I'm not just saying this just to waste my time and waste your time. I'm saying to do it this way to practice it. Okay, so I'm going to force you to practice it and force you to hand it in. All right, I can't oversee you. You could probably write the program first and the design second, but don't do it that way. Learn how to do it correctly. Learn how to do it professionally so you can get hired and make big money in this job. Okay, I know some of these problems are relatively simple. But with that said, still follow the process. Learn the process, okay? And I promise you, you will be rewarded later on, all right? So with that said, we went through this. We did everything we're supposed to do. We now know how to program our program. Now what we're going to do is take this pseudocode and apply it to an actual Visual Basic program, all right? One of the last things I want to talk about on this little list I gave you, right, this design checklist, is writing a program. And so when we talk about writing a program, what do we do? Where do we start from there? How do we organize our program? What you did last week was cool. It was fun. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. You got some programs to work, but that's not real life. You're not going to be making 6 figures because you can say hello world or you can change a text property. You're going to have 6 figures based upon being able to logically solve complicated problems, okay? And again, I'm going to show you how to do that. One of the things we want to do then is when somebody presses the enter key, okay, or the submit key, we write our programs in a way that can be, very easy to manage for us, and number two, I should say, easy to read for the next person who picks it up. So what we're going to do is write every one of our procedures in regards to like the submit, the main event, that we'll declare all our variables first. We'll get and validate our inputs. We're going to do our calculations and then finally display our outputs in that order in those sections. Does that make sense? I'll show you what I mean here in 1 second. Okay, so let's go over here and I'm going to keep my pseudocode up and we will come right here. And as you can see, I started this process already. I'm going to go ahead and I started this process already where I have created the form for us. Let's see if I can get this to move over here. There we go. Where I created the form, okay. And I have, there it is. Oops, almost had it. Hang in there, you go. Drag this puppy down. There we go. And let's see if I can get this back. There you go. Where I created a form where I'm going to have my inputs of a text box 1, text box 2, text box 3, and then 2 output boxes, one for our sum total and one for our product total. Make sense? I have 3 buttons on here. Submit, this is our main event, right? What we want the users to press to actually do these calculations. I have a clear button. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, probably in another video. And finally, an exit button where I want to make sure everybody is comfortable on how to exit a program, okay? So let's get started. So with that said, we have our submit button here. So if I double click on this, you'll see it takes me now to a area here. I'm going to squeeze over. That is my button submit. And what I have put in here is these things called comments. Comments, C-O-M-M-E-N-T-S. I want to make sure I pronunciate that correctly. Comments are lines of code within our procedure, or lines, I should say, within our procedure that are commented out, and in doing so, that means they do not execute. They're there for one purpose only, to document your program, again, for that next person picking it up. What you're going to do is exactly this. You're going to create 4 sections in your main event, okay? In this case, it'll be a button submit, and it'll probably be a button submit for quite a while. Meaning I want you to put those comments there. How do you do it? It's actually pretty easy. If I just put some words there, I can come up here and all I need to do is put a single quote in front of it and it becomes a comment. Okay, it greens itself out and it'll never be executed. That makes sense? Okay, that is a comment. What we're going to do now is code each section as we go through it in this particular order. If you're going to ask me later on, do I have to do it this way? Yes, you do. There is a method to my madness and a reason why we're going to be doing this that you're going to find out probably about 8 to 10 weeks from now. I want you to do it in this order. I want you to comment it. I don't want you interchanging anything. I want you to do it like you're going to be taught here. I don't care if you learned it any different way somewhere else, online, in high school, somewhere else. You do it this way for this particular course, okay? I can't stress it enough. There's a reason why I'm going to ask you to do this, okay? So the first thing we need to do, we talked about variables already, is we need to declare our variables. So when we say declare a variable, that's actually a new word that you probably have not heard before, okay? When we declare a variable, meaning when the code is actually executed to declare a variable, it's telling the computer to allocate memory, okay, RAM memory, to hold that value. So what we want to do is recognize the variables that we identified in our design process and declare them. To declare them in Visual Basic, you use the word dim. Dim is short for dimension. I'm not quite sure why they use dimension, but that's what you do. Dim is telling the next step. Let me finish up this whole sentence and we'll go through it a little bit. DEC number 1 as decimal. I'm going to go ahead and just put this whole thing in here, and I'm going to talk about it now a little bit. This is a piece of code that tells the computer to declare a value in memory that will hold a decimal value. We've already talked about data types. So it's going to hold enough space, it's going to provide enough space to hold that decimal value, and its name's going to be DEC, Hungarian notation. Go back and look at the cheat sheet I gave you last week on Hungarian notation. So you need to name your variables using Hungarian notation. So DEC stands for decimal, number 1. That's how you declare a variable so when that piece of code executes, that's what will happen. You've got to preface everything with a dim statement in Visual Basic. So I will do that for every one of my variables that I identified over in my design. See how easy this is? Because it's already designed. I don't really need to think about anything. I usually get people sitting back going, oh, what variables do I need? Well, I already designed it. I don't have to think about it. I already know. I went over there. I already know the data types because I already thought about it. So I thought my process through, and then I'm coding it. It takes me so much less time. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many students walk in and just start coding and think they're going to solve the world and and shortcut everything, and it never happens. I haven't seen it yet, but you guys might want to prove me wrong. Okay, our output is sum total, so we'll have sum total as decimal also. Okay, and then dim DEC product total as decimal. Now, of course, if it's not a decimal, it's going to be an integer. Okay, I'll just going to do int total. You would say as integer. See how integer, there it is, would pop up. If you have a string, DEM STR RING as string. If you have a date, DTE is the preference. Birth date as date. Whoops, date, there you go. But I make sure though, I do this correctly. It's 2 words, so I will have birth and date. Get the idea? That's how you declare a variable for each of the different data types we've already talked about. All right, for our particular problem, all we have are these 5 right here. We know that because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Beautiful, isn't it? Okay. The next thing we do after we declare our variables, we're now going to go get our inputs. We talked about it right here. It's like anything. We're going to go get our inputs and we're going to put them into our variables so we can start processing. That's how you do programming, okay? Go get the inputs and get it into the variables to process, all right? I'll talk about it a little bit later on. So Right now, this is going to get rather simple, but later on, we'll actually get into validation. When I say later on, in a couple weeks, we'll get into validation. Right now, all we're going to do is go get our data, just like we said we're going to do right here. Getting our data means as soon as they press submit, we're going to go to the interface, go grab the contents of those text boxes, and get them into our variables. So what I'm saying there is number one equals txt number one dot text. Look at that right there. So that's basically saying go to the interface, go get whatever the content is in the text box when we press submit, and it's going to go into the variable now right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to get everything in the variables, and then we'll do our calculations. Okay, let me finish this. Number two, again, once you start getting used to IntelliSense, you can actually start tabbing. See, I actually go down, dot, text. I can tab over. Once you get used to that, boy, things go pretty fast. And number three, dot text. Does that make sense? That is getting our input into our memory, and so, or the computer's memory, so we can now do calculations. All right, pretty easy so far. The next thing I need to do is this line of code right here. All right, I'm going to do that in calculations. Well, my sum total was this one right here. Okay, let's note something. See those little green lines? I know they were there, probably there before. What happens when those little green lines pop up? Should you change your major? That's what I always say in class. Everybody rolls their eyes. So in that case here, no, go read it. It's no big deal. Green lines means you haven't used the variable yet. Well, duh, we haven't used it yet. We did use these, so the green lines went away. As soon as I use this variable, which I'm going to do right now for the sum total, it will go away also. So don't worry about red lines and stuff like that too much. Kind of just keep doing what you're doing. So DEC sum total, right there I got red lines. You're probably going, oh my God, what did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. We just haven't finished the line yet. So it's just thinking you're finished already. It's assuming that. IntelliSense is pretty picky. So ignore it and just keep doing what you're doing. In this case here, it's going to be DE sum total, DEE number one. Let's see, number one is going to be plus DEC number two, using our plus arithmetic operators we just talked about in a previous video, and number three. And as you see, the red line goes away. This line of code right here equates to this line of code right here. Isn't that beautiful? All right, you're probably saying, yeah, Bob, but I didn't need to do that design to do this. You're practicing. Trust me, practice it anyway, okay? Trust me on this. I can't tell you how many people say the same thing and come back going, oh, I guess I should have paid attention to that. Yeah, you probably should have. All right. And then times DEC number two times DEC number three. And there you go. We now have done our calculations. You note, I don't have a dot text things up there. There are some books, and you might find some things online where people are actually doing calculations with the dot text property. I'm going to tell you, I do not like that. I don't think it's good programming at all. Get everything over into the variables and do the calculations with the variables. Why? Well, we told the computer what the variables are and the data types are and so on. So let the computer, since it knows that, let the computer do its good work with those. If you keep it in the dot text property, okay, it'll never know it. Okay, the computer doesn't know, and you could get unexpected results, meaning results that are different than you expect. Okay, so with that said, always get them into the variables, and then you'll never have an issue. Whew, all right, our last thing here is now display them. Well, how do we display them? Well, we take the results and we stick them into our labels on our screen. So we interface with our screen here, get the input off, doing our calculations and throwing it back on the screen. That's pretty much what a programmer does. These calculations are the process that the programmer takes care of. We got a couple lines of code here. In a couple of weeks, those couple lines of code is going to shoot up to 50, 60, 100 lines of code. Okay, but this is the processes that we take our inputs, process them, and then show the output. Okay, so in this case here, we're going to take that and DEE sum total. Beautiful, and then LBL product equals DEC product total. Okay, we got a problem here. I got some red lines again. And look what this thing says. Value of type decimal cannot be converted to label. Students get this one all the time. What's my problem? Any ideas? If you get this, you forgot to put dot text on the label. Okay? So make note of that little right there, because I'm telling you, people get that one all the time. They forgot to add the dot text. But as soon as you do, it's fine. What do you think? Look at this here. So what we did was we took our design, we now declared our variables, the ones we needed. Remember our little scratch pads. Go back and listen to the variable presentation again if you need a refresher on that. So a little scratch pads, we declared all this space so we can take our inputs and stick them into it. We can now take those inputs and add them together to put them to our output, which is a variable also. And then when we're done, we take the results, basically our output, and put it back to the screen, back to the interface. And what's cool, as soon as we hit end sub, guess what happens to the memory we declared right here? It basically goes away. It automatically erases. So Visual Basic helps us very much to control our resources. Make sense? I know this is the first program. It's getting a little bit more hairier than last week, but hopefully this makes sense. Use my program as your basis and foundation, and template is the term I'm looking for, okay? Use it. Have it sitting next to yours when you're writing yours. Make sure it looks pretty much the same. All right? Okay, cool. So with that, that's where we are on this particular video. I wanted to get you through this. I'm going to come back in a couple of subsequent videos to talk about concatenation, clearing, and also formatting. There'll be short videos, but make sure you take a look at those, because those three things, though easy, are very, very important.